John, the magic might happen. We don't know yet. Anyway, first of all, I want to thank the Dublin Bowie Festival for asking me to do work such as this. It's not really work, although I will be billing you, obviously, John. It's just great to see so many people here in this theatre, because it's fairly apt that we are doing this in the Royal College of Surgeons, because I will be making incisions, and I will be cutting, and we will be delving into one part of the body of the work of David Bowie with two, sorry, that was around there, with two of the most pivotal people of his career. The first person is drummer Woodmansey, who worked with David Bowie as a musician, as a drummer, and as a sounding board from 1969 to 1974 across 5 albums. Man Soul the World, Hunky Dory, The Rise and Fall of Ziggy Stardust and the Spirits of Mars. I don't know how I actually glitched with that title, and I'll be saying, so 4 albums. And thank you, John, thank you, 5. And the other person, obviously, is Tony Visconti, who knew Bowie from 1967 until his death just over 4 years ago. And Tony obviously worked on a number of albums that I've mentioned in the 70s, and obviously and his last 4 albums. So they're both pivotal figures, and I personally am thrilled that I'm going to be able to talk to them about specific details of Bowie's life and career in such an intimate venue, with clearly such intelligent people. So, really, without further ado, please can you welcome Woody Woodmansey and Tony Visconti.
I didn't know we had a support band.
Yeah,
He was good, wasn't he?
yeah. John was the main support. I was just hanging on. So look, just the framework of the next whatever time it will take, longer than 10 minutes, is that I'll be chatting with you about bits and pieces relating to the album, and of course Bowie and your own careers. But also at the end of this, we would like to open the floor for audience questions. So I would advise maybe some of you now, for those who feel they want to ask a question, you're just going to, think of it, put it in the back of your head, and then at the end of the interview, with Tony and Woody, to drag it out and throw it at. Okay, so let's just put a kind of timeline on this. Tony, as I said in the introduction, you first met David Bowie in '67 when you travelled from New York to London to work as a record producer. We will obviously go into all of this quite soon, but just to kind of put everything into context, when did you meet him?
I met David in the autumn of 1967, and he was signed to the publisher whom I worked for, and I didn't know anything about him. I never heard of him. And my publisher said, I had already been working with Mark Bolan for a few weeks. So my publisher called me into his office and he said, I'd like to play something for you. I've got this artist signed to us. We don't know what to do with him. Looking for a producer, and we're looking for someone to kind of focus him in on one style. And he played me David's first album he made for the DRAM company. I forget what it was called, Man of Words and Music or something like that. And I liked it, and I said, he's kind of all over the place, I get what you mean, but I think I could work with him. He said, would you like to meet him? I said, yes. He goes, he's in the next room. So it was a big setup. And my publisher was doing a big sell on me, But I really was attracted to his voice and his lyrics. And then I went into the next room, and he was all grinning, and he knew he was going to meet me, so it really was a setup. And as soon as I met him, the most perplexing thing was, which eye do you look into? Because as we all know, this man had two different eyes, you know. And but once we met, we spent the rest of the day together. We found we had so much in common. We went to see a film that night, a Roman Polanski film, because we liked black and white, scratchy films. You know, and if they were foreign, even more. So you know, so we got on like house on fire the first day.
And what did you think of him as a creative person? Did that take long to get a sense of that for you as his producer, not just as a friend?
Oh, it was obvious that he was creative and he had great ideas, and like we spoke about more things than he was writing about in those days. He was flirting with a lot of philosophies, and we were both attracted to Eastern philosophy, mainly Tibetan Buddhism. And this, you know, he wrote a song called Karma Man, but he was thinking like 10 times the speed of other people. I could just see his brain working, you know, when he spoke to me. But we didn't get off to a great start because he was signed to this label and they had another male artist, and that guy was called Cat Stevens. And Cat Stevens got the hit, David Bowie didn't, so I have the distinction of getting him sacked from the label. You know, the one I think I did Karma Man, and somebody, Let Me Sleep Beside You was the first thing I went into the studio with. And it wasn't, you know, good enough. It wasn't a hit single, and that would be a dream he would follow for the next few years before he wrote a hit single. That still wasn't in his vocabulary yet. How you do that? How you break into the top 10?
Okay. Well, he did eventually get a hit quite shortly, within the space of a couple of years, with, as we all know, Space Oddity.
Yeah.
But for a while then, it was a bit of a one-hit wonder type atmosphere, I think.
Yeah, when he brought it to me, you know, I've gone down a record saying, I said, that's kind of not a David Bowie song, and it wasn't yet. He was writing like folk rock, you know, he was writing that kind of, his 12-string was the core of his backing, you know, and he was writing, he was singing in pubs and all that. And I said, that could be a hit, David. I said, but I think you're going to have a tough time following it. Like, what are you going to write, Space Oddity, and what a Moon song, or a Mars song, you know? So anyway, I was kind of right. Oh yeah, he did. I put the idea in his head. But seriously, that's what the problem is. It took him ages to get that second hit single. Meanwhile, it got him a good record contract, and we went in and made a fabulous album. The Space Oddity album is one of my favorites. Yeah. And I remixed it last year.
Sure. So, again, you know, we all know this, or certainly 99.9 of us do, that the second album with Space Oddity on it, the song, was a very kind of folksy, quiet album. But when we're looking at The Man Who Sold the World, which was released 1 year after, that was a kind of metallic album. It was quite hard rock. Why did the style change so radically from one album to the next? And just to put the question into context, if I may, you know, Space Oddity was a hit. So how come, like a lot of other artists, did they not do Space Oddity version 2 in order just to get into the charts?
Oh, they asked him to do that, and he tried. Everyone was asking for Space, and all the people on the record label. Like I said, it's a hard act to follow. He hadn't yet written Life on Mars. But here's the thing that really changed everything was this gentleman on my left and a rock guitarist called Mick Ronson, whom we met just at the tail end of the Space Oddity album. And they came in and changed our lives. You know, we thought like, oh, you know, we've had enough of this folk rock thing, and David wanted to move on. He really always, as you know, David always moved on from album to album. Never two styles the same. And we got introduced to Mick first, and we just adored him. And he just played great. And we had a drummer from Hull, in Mick's old band called The Rats, a guy called John Cambridge, who was good. But he wasn't like, David was writing these very, very intricate songs, and John wasn't quite getting the changes at the right time. And he was, you know, he was a blues drummer. But then Mick said, okay, it didn't work out. I've got another drummer that I play. And actually, the most embarrassing thing is that Woody replaced John Cambridge in the Rats. And now he's replacing John Cambridge in the Bowie Center too, you know. So he has that distinction. We're both kind of villains in a way.
Well then, Woody, you're in the framework now, you're in the picture. When did you get the first call from, I presume, Bowie, or was it Ronson, to kind of come down to London?
No, it was David. Nick had gone down earlier, like Tony said, and so I was kind of looking in Yorkshire for another band, and I went to see a lot of bands and didn't like anything. And then David just phoned up and said, Nick says you're really good, you fit in with us, you're a great player. I've got this place called Haddon Hall, so you don't have to worry about food. You don't have to worry about paying your way, paying rent or anything like that. We're just going to like rehearse and do an album. That was it basically. And I said, can I ring you back on Monday? Well, I've just done a really good job of it. I'd got kicked out of school, parents didn't like me for quite a while, and then I accidentally got quite good in this job that I was working in. I was working in making a spectacle of myself, we made spectacles, we made glasses, and I got bored. It was a really easy job. You used to have a grinding wheel and shape the frames, you know, those flashy ones. So I used to do all that, and I got bored, so I learned all the machines in the factory just because there were pretty girls on all these machines. So it was a good chance to, you know, check the ladies out. Sure. And then the manager came and said, we want you to be the under foreman. And I was like, what, 18? And I said, but there's guys here that have been waiting for this job 35 years, you know. He said, yeah, but we realised you're the only one that can set the factory up. I said, well, wow, okay. So I had that decision that weekend to make.
What kind of made you decide one or the other?
I sat all weekend basically, I didn't go out. I had the TV on in the lounge and I was just going like all the way that way, playing music, and then all the way that way. Because in my area in Yorkshire, this was a good job, and they'd said, we'll put a down payment on a house, we'll get you a car every year, you'll have holidays and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, wow, that's fantastic. I've never even thought I could get that. But then music, you know, so it was doing this all weekend. And then the TV was still on the Sunday. I kind of imagined myself being 65 years old. Somehow I was in the future and my grandkids were at my feet. The new car was in the drive. I've just had a holiday, and I thought, and I could see my life. And then sort of a band came on the TV. I don't know what band it was, and I imagined me saying to my grandkids, you know, when I was 18, I could have, and the whole thing just froze, basically. It was just like, holy shit, I can see my future if I go that way. And it was boring. Do you know what I mean? That was like, I know I can predict my future so well that way, that what's the point of living almost? I know it's a weird viewpoint, but that's how I looked at it. And I just then picked up the phone and said, yeah, I'm coming down.
So what happened?
My parents then disowned me again, you know. We always knew we were an idiot, Michael.
So what was the next step for you? Did you got the bus?
I came down with Nick to London, and he had to meet somebody in London, so I said, oh, you're going to go to Haddon Hall on your own, which was, okay. And we'd been into progressive rock in Yorkshire in the Rats, so I had like ripped jeans and patches on, and moccasins, I think, hair down here, tie-dye t-shirt, and I thought that was pretty cool. Knocked on the door, David opened the door, he had a rainbow t-shirt on with a silver belt, red corduroy trousers, red shoes with blue stars that he'd obviously painted on himself, and a bangle, and he didn't have curly hair. All I'd ever seen was one flyer in Yorkshire for an open air festival must have been around the Spaceology time, with him with curly hair. So that's what I thought was answering the door, but he had long hair. So that was about the only thing that was similar. And then we just talked about music, and he played me some of his earlier stuff. And I kind of had a checklist in my head. You know, can he sing? Can he write? Because I hadn't really listened to anything. Is he intelligent? Does he look good as a front man? This is my checklist. He probably had maybe a couple of things on his list. And I'd listened to the stuff he was playing me, and I was like, okay, I haven't heard the drums on anything yet really loud, and I was a loud drummer, so I was a bit, how have I made a mistake, you know? And then he picked his 12-string up, and he played Wild Eyed Boy from Pre-Cloud, and it just blew me away, just as a song, and he was 6 feet away from me, and I went, how, the impact, and I just went, okay, all boxes ticked, you know.
What was your first take on him within that first 2 or 3 days, week period? Did you?
No, I hadn't met anybody like that. I mean, we were mainly doing covers of Led Zeppelin, Hendrix, Cream, and things like that. So we hadn't met the source of music or the creative push. We were just copying, basically. So I got this guy had a lot of ideas. You know, he talked a lot, he was intelligent, and he looked at things from even angles like why that music was successful was parents didn't like that because he'd had it all figured out, you know. But in Europe they don't look at it like that because they've got more of a family unit, so they all listen to the same music, and I was like, wow, he's gone into this in depth, you know. But he didn't have a direction. And there was in his conversation, the idea that he thought he might be a one-hit wonder that came up in conversation. And I think Angie came in and went, no, you're not David, you know, blah, 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 blah. So that was my impression. He hadn't streamlined and he didn't know what direction. He just knew he wanted to not do folk, but do rock. He knew that.
Right. Tony, what was Haddon Hall like? I mean, I read about it, it seems incredibly bohemian, free-flowing, a bit hippie, a bit...
It was kind of bedlam.
Punk.
It was bedlam.
Right, okay.
We had people coming in and out of the front door day and night, and all kinds of, because David ran a thing called the Arts Lab at the 3 Tons, a pub which was down the road. And that attracted people, not local people, but people from all over London who had some weird thing that they do, you know, like some strange songwriters and people doing all kinds of things. And so that was the filter. They came to the 3 Tons and they ended up at Haddon Hall. And we'd wake up in the morning and find people sleeping on the floor, and you know, it was a strange place to be in. But it was exciting at the same time. We had all kinds of people who were actually very stimulating people, and they were local, like Christmas was there and all that. Yeah, we had some local friends who were...
Lots of girls.
Hey, lots of girls, too, very pretty girls. Shut up.
Carry on, Tony.
But the thing about, like when Woody said, David, you don't have to worry about food. We actually did have to worry about food. We had the biggest row in our lives about food.
Yeah.
We were going to give David and Angie, well, we had a pool. All of us who lived there, £8 a week, £8 a week. And that was the budget for the week, and that would get us enough brown rice and hummus and, you know, all the stuff, broccoli, carrots and all that. When it was David's turn to shop with Angie, they'd go to some gourmet supermarket and spend a lot in one day, like it was enough food for one day if you wanted to eat rich, fatty food, you know. And we had a big row about that because I must explain that David already had received a large advance from the record label because of Space Oddity. He had money in the bank, and he had his father's Riley, this hand-cranked Riley that he would get in that car, and he and Angie would go down the Old Kent Road, where they're full of antique shops, you know, in London, and they'd come back with these big pieces of antiques and all that, you know, so if we blew the food budget in one day, they would just go out to a restaurant the rest of the week. So we had this difference of social strata within, you know, we were working class and they were posh idiots. It came to that, didn't it? You know?
Did that matter when it came to the creative output of the
No, because you were hungry.
Yeah, we had to sing for ourselves, literally. But we had a good, in this beautiful flat. This flat was enormous. It was cavernous, and it had stained glass windows that went up to the second floor, and like a gallery off to the side where obviously a wealthy Victorian family lived at one time, and those doorways led to bedrooms. But now it was just a kind of a gallery with, you could probably hang paintings up there. And that's where we threw down a few mattresses, and that's where Woody slept up there with Mick Ronson, like on the floor on the mattresses.
Not with him.
When you get to it, and Haddon Hall stays in Haddon Hall. But I was in my girlfriend Liz and I shared another big bedroom, and Dave and Angie shared the bedroom next to us, and then we had a big living room, which was nice. I don't even think we had a telly. It was just, no, we talked to each other. And then, but meanwhile, this big hall, nothing went on there. You know, the big hole was just a big waste of space.
Yeah.
But we did have, what I'm getting around to, we did have a wine cellar in the basement. We had no money for wine, but we put that thing where musicians put up egg crates, thinking it's going to do something for the sound, which is complete nut about. So we moved into the drum kit, and I had my 100-watt amp. Mick had his 100-watt amp, and we learned and wrote The Man Who Sold the World down in that basement. So it did prove it was a terrific experience. When the four of us were together, we were a real unit. You know, we were terrific, on the same page. David loved this direction, and we loved playing this music. Mick he was inspired by Cream, and he told me, he says, you listen to Jack Bruce, that's how you should play. And I was standard American bass player then, playing funk and all that, but I listened to Jack Bruce and I said, it's lead bass. So it was very cultural. We were all feeding each other information from our experiences, and we were all absorbing it, and made us a cohesive group of people, and then we went into the studio.
Right. What was Angie Bowie like?
I loved her. Angie's got, you know, over the years she's been, you know, vilified, but she was a wonderful person. If it was not for her, what people don't realize is Dave was kind of shy in those days, and he had a manager called Ken Pitt who was kind of shy, and we needed some testosterone in that group, and she had it. And Angie was brazen. You know, she would go into a label and say, she'd go into David's label, I want £4,000. We need it. You know, we have a band now. They need equipment, and she'd get it. No one, you know, she was one of the first aggressive business people I ever met in my life, and she didn't know anything about business except she knew a lot about aggression, and I mean that good about her.
She was loud. She was really loud.
Brassy American, and brassy to me because I come from New York City where people are pretty, you know, gruff. But she came from Cyprus, and she had, I don't know where she got this attitude from, but she was brilliant. And she picked us all up, you know, and got us the deal for our band, got us the studio time, and got him to make The Man Who Sold the World. She was brilliant.
And how did the Brooklyn Boy get on with the guys from the north? Were there any culture clashes?
I didn't even notice they had accents. But
I didn't understand it for 3 years.
I didn't understand it for 3 years. I think we got it great.
Yeah, it was the humour. Right?
Yeah.
The sense of humour was, somehow it was Yorkshire, London and Brooklyn, and it seemed to gel, didn't it?
Yeah, Brooklyn and Hull were the funniest people. David wasn't all that funny. We were really hilarious. Especially him.
In what way do you think did Angie influence Bowie's creative bent, if I can use that word?
I think, I mean, I noticed a lot of times when David had an idea he wanted to do, and he would go, I'm not sure about, and she would go, David, you got to do it. You just got to do that because, what do you? And that was it. And that was enough. You know, and it did need that.
Do you agree with that, Tom?
She pushed him, yeah. He would love to sit with a book or just go to a gallery or something like that. He was still not in that aggressive mode himself yet.
Yeah.
And it took two people who have often been vilified. It took Angie and Tony DeFries to make him think like a rock star. He could see it, but you know, he wasn't quite acting that way yet. And I think, you know, he needed a boost, and the two right people appeared in his life at the right time. But Angie wasn't so much about creative as much as she was like telling him to work. So we got to work and write more songs and, you know, rehearse with your band and do gigs.
Okay, so was his work ethic undeveloped at that point? Was he still in this kind of, what I would imagine to be some kind of mid-level, almost fey, whimsical period about being a rock star?
Well, he was trying for years to break out. You know, he had other bands, the Lower Third, and you know, he had different hairstyles and different instruments. He played the saxophone and stuff like that. And nothing happened, you know, so he was probably, when we met him, he was a bit wounded. I think he'd been around the block many times. And I remember when I spoke to my mentor, Denny Cordell, that I was going to work with David Bowie, he said, oh, that guy, he's like used goods, you know, like he and Mark Bolan had the same trajectory, like promising, and then they weren't famous by the time they were 20 years old, and the industry kind of ignored them, and they were looking for younger people and different people. So Angie gave him a lot of hope, and where he actually got keen to work hard again, and to say, maybe this will be it, maybe this time. And then having the affirmation of Space Oddity being a hit was another very important element, and Money in the Bank, etc. You know.
Well, then, when did The Man Who Sold the World, the songs for that, start to kind of bubble up within the Hatton Hall atmosphere of very little food for you, loads of food for Bowie and Angie?
Yeah.
In the wine cellar, basically.
It was the wine cellar that did it. And no, Mick and this Mick, he's Mick too, he's Michael as well. The two of them, in entering our lives, made us eager to get down into that wine cellar and jam all day long. That was really fun. It was, you know, deafening as well, but it was really fun. And that's when David started writing. He'd write for us. It continued, the process continued until we actually went into the studio, because we didn't quite have enough songs. So, for instance, Black Country Rock was written in the studio, and maybe one or two others where we just didn't have enough songs. But that's when I panicked. It was the first time in my life, and my short 3-year career as a record producer, where I had an artist who didn't finish songs. You know, I'm used to an artist bringing me songs and say, okay, we've got a dozen songs, we'll go into the studio and record you a dozen songs. He had only about 6.
And they were just chords, mainly, weren't they?
Yeah.
He'd give you and make the chords and say, I think this is a verse, this is another bit that goes somewhere.
Yeah. We were guessing.
And then I think this could be a chorus.
But this was
Is
something...
there a song? Not yet. Is there any lyrics? Not yet.
Yeah.
And we were like, so we just basically set up like a live band in the studio, and just Tony and Mick basically
You know,
put it into sequence, the chords, so it sounded like, well, that feels good. And Tony was good at going, that's a nice bit, let's repeat that.
Sure.
We put that like a jigsaw, made it like into a picture.
it's something, you know, without sour grapes, nowadays if a group writes a bass part, a drum part, well, everyone gets a writing credit.
Indeed.
But David, and I was even old school, I said, well, this part is arranging. We're actually arranging the song. But when you look back, we were composing it simultaneously, all of us together. But it also started a trend which it never stopped. I mean, it was disarming at first, that where's the songs? We only have chords, you know, we have to come up with beats and all that. But until Black Star, he was still writing songs in the studio. I thought 2 songs on Black Star were written in the studio, or just the night before, and unfinished. And so now, by that time, I was used to it. I knew he could pull it off. But the first time, I said, "Oh, this is going to be a disaster." You know?
Does it rankle at all that you didn't get co-songwriting credits?
No, I'm not saying.
Yes. Nobody was getting songwriting. Like Mick Jagger and Keith Richards wrote a song. The rest of the Stones didn't get royalties either for writing credits. It was just the way things were in those days.
Sure. Okay.
But he changed after that. I mean, after we didn't go on the road with The Man Who Sold the World, and it didn't like set the world on fire. He did a promotional trip for that album to America. Met Warhol, met Iggy Pop, met Lou Reed, brought Iggy Pop videos back for us to watch.
Yeah.
And after that point, every song that he brought was finished. It was completed. Intro, verse, chorus, verse, chorus, double chorus, middle A, chorus, blah, blah, blah. So it was all there. You know, lyrics completely finished. So that trip changed, and that was the next like echelon of streamlining what he wanted to do. Okay. I personally think that up to that point he was more affected by what was selling and what was around and what things he liked. Oh, I'll have a bit of Anthony Newley, I'll have a bit of that, I'll have a bit of that. Put it into my melting pot. A little bit of David Bowie sometimes was in it, but it was, you could hear the vocal influences and the lyrical things. And if you knew the music he'd listened to, you could feel where it came from. Do you know what I mean? He hadn't just gone, like, fuck it, I'm going to write what David Bowie wants to say. And I think watching Iggy and Lou Reed and things like that, they weren't like mega successful, but they were doing what they felt like. You know, Lou was singing about S&M, Iggy was singing I Want to Be Your Dog. It was like, whoa, you know, it was that kind of thing wasn't in England then. And I think you give David that, I've got to do what I want to do. And that changed it. And then all those ideas were always there. It was then, because a lot of the concepts on the later albums were all there in The Man Who Sold the World. They're the kind of the same concepts, but done more streamlined, more communicative, in a simpler way sometimes, but the same ideas.
Right. Is it true that he didn't have any lyrics ready for the songs of The Man Who Sold the World until the day they were...
That particular song was recorded, the same day we recorded it, he wrote the lyrics in the lobby with Angie, and like, looking over his shoulder. And that was our last day of the budget too. I couldn't spend one more pound on that record. That was the last day of the album. And I'm sweating bullets here. And then he comes in because I think I finished the song, and he went and sang it. And one great thing about David, and which Woody saw many times, he's a two-take guy. He doesn't sing the song more than twice in the studio, where other artists might sing 20 times. And, until they get it right. He was such a great singer, so at least that part didn't take long, but waiting for the song to be written took a long time.
The two-take aspect, was it also, I'm wondering, he just didn't have the patience to do it?
No, he was that good. And even when we were making the next day or something, I said to him, why don't you give me a third take? You know, like, so I have something. He said, why? And I just have an alternative take. He goes, but why? You know, I said, okay, sit down.
And then when we were
was
doing
great, and he knew it. That's what I'm saying.
Sure. Okay.
when we were not first recording, because that was The Man Who Sold the World. When we got back into recording the later albums, we thought we were going to have like 6, 7 takes of a song. We'd go in the studio. It'd kind of be, Mick and I would be doing breakfast, and he'd be finishing a song in the bedroom. He had a piano in there, and you'd hear something like Mickey Mouse has grown up a cow coming through the butler's thing. There was a butler's serving hatch. You go, that's fucking weird, isn't it? toast. And then you kind of thought you'd have a few takes at it. So you get in the studio and then you go, are we doing that one? And they'd say, Woody, I finished one, come in and listen, and you play it. You go, oh, that's good, I like that. He said, yeah, we're going in on Monday or whatever. You get in on Monday and you go, are we doing that one that you... No, I'm not doing that, I finished this other one. You're like, fucking hell. You know, because you just got ready to record, just a quarter of an hour off recording. And he'd say, oh, do you want to play us it? And you play it, maybe twice if you're lucky. So we had to really go, fucking hell, how does it start? What is there a middle bit? Does it stop? We're doing that verbally, really quickly. What does it go out on? It goes out on choruses and then there's a guitar bit. Yeah, okay. And then then David would go, are we rolling, basically? Is it in record? And we're like, fucking hell. Trevor was like a deer in the headlights. You didn't know whether you got it all in there, you know. And then you do a take, and you go, okay, let's go and have a listen. You go and have a listen, and I'd be going, oh yeah, I thought it did that, but you know, now I know. And I go, should we go do another one? And you go, no, that's it. You go, what? You go, that's the one. That's exactly what I want. And we were like, I honestly thought he's a fucking idiot. Because it hadn't clicked. And then we realised after doing this maybe 2 or 3 times that he actually wanted, what do you feel like playing that's fresh, that isn't laboured and repeating. Otherwise you're doing a tribute to yourself before you were kids. You know what I mean? You're copying what you did, because on the third take you're going, oh, I like that bit. As you're doing it, you're thinking, I like what I did on the first one, I'm going to do that again. So you're already not creating it right now.
Yeah.
You're kind of copying yourself.
Yeah.
And it loses something when you're doing that. He wanted that, and he applied that to his own vocals. There was once, I think, it might have been Life on Mars, he did a take, first take, and then Ken said, that's pretty good. He said, I'll do another one. And Ken Scott said, but that was pretty good, David. He went, no, I don't mean another take. I'll do that again, put them both together. And we went, what, sing it exactly the same? And he went, yeah. And he went, Ken had a tash and he went, fuck. He went with the Beatles and whatever, you know. And he did it. And you could not hear 2 voices. It was just exact. And he went, yeah, that's what I wanted.
Yeah. At this point, I just want to say that your answer, Woody, has given the Dublin Bowie Festival the tagline for next year. David Bowie, the fucking idiot.
Can I just say something? Yes. I am now, I've mixed the Space Oddity album last year, I'm mixing the Man Who Sold the World now. What I realized is that early on, if we didn't get a take we liked, like the band take, we would wipe the one we just played. We wouldn't save it. So it's called the seat of your pants recording.
Yeah.
But David had a term for it, and this is really funny. He said, I want to cut out, he says it's in Buddhism, the mire of options. He said, I don't want to have 7 takes to select from. When we've got it, we've got it. And I said, that's interesting, because I could hear at the end of, like, for instance, The Saving Machine, I could hear a bit of the take we just did before, just a tiny bit left at the end. You know, we didn't wipe these takes, and we just stopped when we said that's right. But we couldn't say, oh, why don't you go back to take 3? That take 3 was evaporated, it went off into the cosmos. And just another thing, I looked at all the Buddhist teachings I could find. I've never heard this term, the mire of options.
I would say to him, I think we can do a better one. You know, he'd done 2 takes. Let's do another one. And he would go, no, that is what I want. Let me put my 12 string on. He would do that. And then he would say, let me put the vocals on. And as he sat listening, it just opened up. And he went, hell, he's right. You know what I mean? I don't think I ever heard him, he never did anything or said anything that didn't work out as right. So then you got, when he said, that's the take, you went, that's the take.
Tony, as his producer and also his close friend. I mean, at that point, you know, from effectively one album per year for, you know, certainly in you're involved with about 4 or 5 years. Did you think he was going just too fast? As a producer?
I'll only say that about one album. I questioned the album called Reality. I think we should have waited another year. And it's only because he put so much effort into Heathen, and Heathen came after a long period of not recording, that I think we still weren't ready to record. And you know, we were even talking about that. Should we start a new album and all that? And I said, well, we could. We don't have to keep it. You know, we could re-record. But suddenly, it was the last time he allowed himself to be under restraints from the label. Once he told the label he was making a new album, they said it has to be delivered September or something like that. And we got that album finished for the demands of the label. He never allowed that to happen ever again. He recorded at his leisure afterwards, and to good effect. You know, the next day we didn't even tell anybody we were making the next day. And of course, you know, where are we now? Just dropped like a hydrogen bomb on the planet. You know, no one saw that one coming, because he said the album will be finished when it's finished. And you know, unlike the earlier albums, which were really fairly quick affairs, that the next day it took about 6 months. You know.
But just going back to the early albums, that early stretch of albums, I mean, the strike rate, I mean, even from the perspective of, you know, 50, 45 years was phenomenal. Was there a sense within Bowie and yourself and you, Woody, that the strike rate was particularly high, or was this just an artist who was just so prolific at that point that he was just throwing them out?
Yeah, there was that element. When we finished Ziggy, and I think 2-3 weeks later we were back in doing. No, we finished Hunky Dory, and 2 or 3 weeks later we were in doing Ziggy, and he'd been writing through Hunky Dory, and it was just coming out, and every track seemed to be like, well, yeah, that's good. It was just there was no crap. Not that there was crap before, but everyone was a. Ooh, yeah, that'd be good, that's good. He just had it in.
Well, he was also playing out all the time. He was constantly touring, and you needed an album to promote. It was no big, strenuous thing to him.
No.
He was just prolific and wanted to be on stage.
When we finished Ziggy, RCA said, we're not releasing it. You haven't got a single. You know, and we were like, what? You know, we loved what we'd done already. So, okay, went on the weekend, wrote down, and got all of us Monday and said, okay, it's done, and then it's like, hell yeah, that's a single. Do you know what I mean? And I always thought he always had that ability, right, from that point where he streamlined what he was doing and did it from David Bowie. He could do that anytime he actually felt like it. If he was under pressure, or if he just decided, I need to do a single. He didn't go commercially, obviously that way. He just went into that mode of, you know, I guess something like Heroes. That suggests that, to me, he just went, yeah, that idea, that'll work, that's good for a single, but there's no compromise on it musically to make it into a single or anything. It's just, and I thought he always had that ability, but he didn't always feel like doing that.
Okay. Tony, I think you said once in an interview that Ziggy Stardust wouldn't have happened unless The Man Who Sold the World had been there.
Well, Woody and I often feel like The Man Who Sold the World was the blueprint, or the matrix, we call it, for future Bowie albums. We cut a lot of ground on that. We covered a lot of ground on that. You have the delicate ballad of After All, and that was a style that he expanded into other songs. You might say, I don't know, like Life on Mars might have come from that. And you know, then we did the hard rock thing with Width of a Circle, which a lot of Ziggy was based on that sound too. And even when we were making The Next Day, we were listening to The Man Who Sold the World, and we brought some things in. Yeah, okay. There's so much information, such a dense album. There's so much information on that album, there's still, you know, material that could have been developed. And a lot of artists do, like, they write this thing and they have to put the album out. And I said, well, I could have made that better. And that's what the next album is about. You know, it's a continuous, like composers wrote symphonies. You know, they didn't stop at Symphony No. 1. You know, it's just what do you call it? What's the plural of, I don't even know what I'm talking about. Opus. Opus.
It's a very brave addition.
Opus is opera is the plural of opus. I don't know if anyone knows that.
I didn't know that.
And you fucking do.
Did he have a sense, like, you know, back then and latterly, of the quality of the material? And when I say quality, I mean either like good or bad. Did he have a good sense of that as the songwriter, as the creator of the music?
No, I mean, I think when you were in the studio, it was just between the four people playing that you thought you'd individually clicked for that song. We understood what he was trying to put across, even if the lyrics were a bit out there. You made your own concept, the same as anybody does when they hear a song. It's what it means to you. We were able to do that, grasp it. But I don't think, we certainly, none of us, including David, went, oh, just think in 50 years we'll be doing Dublin festivals. do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, with any artist that does songs that good, they initially get promoted, the plugger does his thing on the radio, people buy it, and then you don't have to do anything. If it's one of those songs, nothing else has to be done with it. It just floats through the radio stations worldwide, and it's always there, and it's played every week. And he did a lot of those. You know, he had that ability to communicate, which is what it's all about as an artist. He had that. Did that answer the question?
Well, he himself...
I was getting up on myself, right?
David himself had very high standards. He kept very high standards for himself. And I mean, I was around the time when he, especially during the next day, he did write other songs and then declared them not good enough. And we didn't even finish them. So I think this might have been throughout his career. He knew when he wrote a great song. And that's all I can say about it. So the standards, by his own standards, were very high. And I would agree with everything that he said made the final grade. Sometimes he would have, like, he did a lot of so-called throwaway B-sides, like for nowadays when you make a record, Japan needs more songs than the rest of the world. For some reason, you have to give the Japanese more songs than the rest of the world. And he'd have fun on those. Even those throwaways were not thrown away. We would create, we would treat them as if they were like going to be on the album. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah. The kind of random question springs to mind. When you said that, you know, he was very free after reality, that he had full control over what he wanted to release. What did you make of the Toy album? This, for those, and I'm sure we all know, the Toy album was scheduled for release in or around, I don't know, 2000, 2001-ish, kind of, and then it was never released. Now it's online, allegedly.
Well, I'll tell you a little backstory to that. He loved Toy. He thought he was making like the best album of his life. And he was with a label at the time who rejected it. It was rejected. And that really took the wind out of his sails. He was so upset about that. So then we'd keep, I was involved in, Mark Platty produced most of it, but I was involved in writing the string arrangements and backup vocals and things like that, so I was involved in Toy as well. And then I ended up mixing the whole album, and even after it was like mixed to perfection, it was still rejected. But, you know, he slowly released it over the years as bonus tracks and filler tracks, which I think he shouldn't have done that. It should have been an officially released album. It's a great album. There's great music on it. Yeah, but that was it. You know, imagine someone at his level telling a label saying, rejecting an album like Toy. Like, who the hell did they think they were doing that? So that's right.
songs that aren't released. Is it true that there are around 5 or 6 songs that he recorded, kind of as demos in the weeks leading up, or maybe perhaps a couple of months leading up to his death?
Well, he did tell me he wrote. I spoke to him before Christmas and he died 3 weeks later. But he said he had 5 written, which means to him that means he's got like drum beats and chord changes. I don't know if they were lyrics, but I don't think you'll ever see those released because they probably don't have vocals on them, and I never heard them. And they are safely in the vault somewhere. I don't know what's ever going to become of them. And I don't know. They're on tracks that I didn't reproduce everything, so I would assume that there are things that people haven't heard yet, but I don't know what they are. But I know they've got a lot of stuff in there.
Okay. I'm just going to open it out to the audience in a couple of minutes, but before I do that, it's as everybody knows, it's just over 4 years after his death. We had a kind of correspondence for the Irish Times a couple of weeks ago, and you said something really extremely poignant in that when you were recording his final 2 albums, The Next Day on Black Star, that in your New York studio, that there was a sofa that he sat on and read books while you were toying with whatever engineering or technical stuff you do, and that area now has now become something of a shrine with a portrait of him there. And I'm just going to quote from that interview because it really struck me as being particularly poignant. That sometimes, especially around now when I've been remixing some back catalogue of his, I turn to the portrait and ask him what he thinks. I think that's just
It keeps me going, I can't accept that he died. And, he was over my right shoulder. He was sitting in the corner there. And somebody, a friend of mine whom I met on Facebook, made this incredible portrait of him with charcoal. And she sent it to me, and I put it over that spot where he sits. So it's now becoming a shrine. But the thing is, when I invite people, my friends here, to the studio, they take turns sitting in that spot. That's where David Bowie's bone was. And you sit in that spot, and you get to see the perspective of my studio from that position. He spent hours and hours. Like when I was mixing, he would just bring 2 or 3 books with him and read. And the books were various subjects. One was remarkable. It was like a book on China that you drink tea out of, expensive China. I said, "What's that book?" It's about China. I said, "The country?" No, the teacups. And so I spent he spent like so many hours in that chair, and then he'd always be listening to the mixes, and then I would turn to him and say, "I'm ready for you now. You can come in and critique it," And that's how I spent, the last 2 albums with him in that cozy little studio. And my fondest memories, the last days I've spent with him were in that cubby hole there.
Sure. I'm going to open it out to the audience now. I'm going to have a beady eye out for people